Okay, go home. But in case you're interested, your husband was murdered. Somebody's been dumping thousands of tons of water from the city's reservoirs, and we're supposed to be in the middle of a drought. He found out about it, and he was killed. There's a waterlogged drunk in the morgue, involuntary manslaughter if anybody wants to take the trouble, which they don't. It seems like half the city is trying to cover it all up, which is fine by me. But Mrs. Mulray, I goddamn near lost my nose, and I like it. I like breathing through it. And I still think that you're hiding something.
You're a very nosy fellow, kitty cat, huh? You know what happens to nosy fellows? They lose their noses.
She's my daughter.
You may think you know what you're dealing with, but believe me, you don't.
She's my sister.
I said I want the truth!
She's my daughter.
See, Mr. Gitz, most people never have to face the fact that at the right time, the right place, they're capable of anything.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
Hello, I'm film historian Tony Maietta.
And I'm Brad Shreve, who's just a guy who likes movies.
We discuss movies and television from Hollywood's golden age. We go behind the scenes and share our opinions, too.
And of course, being the average guy, my opinions are the ones that matter.
As does your self-delusion. Welcome to Going Hollywood.
Tony, I have been recommending that we do Chinatown almost since day one, and you've never been against it, but we kept getting put off and put off and put off. I'm glad I was persistent.
I did, because you know why?
Why?
Because I'm a scared.
This is a movie to be scared of.
Because, this is the mount. We are confronting the mountain here. We are the mountain. And ironically, Paramount that made Chinatown, the emblem's the mountain. They used to call Paramount the mountain in the 70s because of the emblem. And yeah, it is. It is. When you said you wanted to do Chinatown after Robert Towne died just recently, I was like, okay, all right, let me stretch. Let me do some carb loading here. Because, you know, this mountain we're going to climb of Chinatown is daunting. It's the apex is what it is. That's my feeling, at least. I mean, yeah, maybe Godfather Part II is up there as well, but Chinatown is right up there, you know, as the greatest, many people say, it's taught in schools, film schools, the greatest screenplay of all time. So it's like, wow, we're going to take this on. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, Roman Polanski says it's his greatest work. And it's number, I think, 21 on AFI's 100 films of all time. It should be higher. I mean, it's behind It's a Wonderful Life, and you know how I feel about that.
Yes, well, AFI.
This movie is just, on so many levels. It's just.
Well, yeah, it's the apex. It's the greatest. It's the greatest. It's not only the apex of. It's the apex of this time in Hollywood, too. And I think that's really important to point out. You know, this incredible era that began in with Virginia Woolf and certainly with Bonnie and Clyde, hit its and went on through Harold and Maude and Rosemary's Baby and The Godfather, Love Story, What's Up, Doc? The Last Picture Show, I could go on and on and on. Hit really came to zenith with Chinatown in 1974. So it's a daunting task, but we're going to take it on because I'm ready to go. I'm pumped for Chinatown. But there's one thing I want to mention. You know, you're on me all the time about should we do spoiler alerts? And if we're going to do a spoiler alert for any movie, it's got to be this one.
Oh, yeah. If this movie has been on your list and you haven't watched it, I hate to say this, turn us off. Go watch it, but come back because you don't want anything spoiled from this movie.
For once, I agree with you that they should turn us off and go watch a movie first. Usually I'm like, no, they can still enjoy it. No, you can't. You have to go watch it because I'm not going to spoil this ending for you. I think it's almost, you know, it's kind of like The Usual Suspects or the Bruce Willis film, The
Sixth Sense.
The Sixth Sense.
Totally like The Sixth Sense.
It's that kind of spoiler alert. You know, you have got to watch this movie before you listen to us because we're going to give it away real soon here, I'm sure. And I'm not going to take that responsibility on, as well as talking about Chinatown to you.
So Do, 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 do. Okay, for those of you still left with us, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie.
We're going to barrel on through.
One of the reasons why I love this film is anybody that's read my mysteries, I love LA history and I love mysteries, and this has it all for me.
Oh, yeah. God, yeah. And beautiful production values. I mean, we don't get into the production yet, but Richard Sylbert, I mean, you know, a mythic production designer, created this most beautiful world. And yes, Roman Polanski and Faye Dunaway and Jack Nicholson at their peaks. And Robert Evans, who pretty much was the wunderkind of Paramount in the early 70s, who was behind Rosemary's Baby and was behind Love Story and these incredible films and was quite a character. So I'm excited to talk about Robert Evans in this. But it's these artists working at their absolute peak. And you know the really sad thing? It was the peak and then it was over. Because what happened the following year? Jaws. And Jaws is the shark that ate all of Hollywood. Because after Jaws and after this blockbuster mentality that came into being because of Jaws, suddenly these films with story, and the Hollywood didn't want to spend money on investing in story development anymore. They wanted to spend money on marketing so they could have another Jaws. So the tail started wagging the dog at that point. And then, of course, Star Wars. And then right up to where we are today, where, you know, when you find a film that has this story, a story as dense and complex and satisfying, good or bad, as Chinatown is incredibly rare these days. They're like gold.
And I agree with you, but I will say 74, there were some great films, but actually overall it was a really bad year for movies. I was looking through the movies that year, and there were great ones. Blazing Saddles is there. Was Godfather 2 that year?
Godfather Part II. Yeah, it won. It won Chinatown's Oscar.
Young Frankenstein, which I'm not real wild about, but most people absolutely love that film. I think Blazing Saddles is up near the top of my list.
Sure.
But we also had, what was the highest grossing film? Was it Towering Inferno, for God's sakes?
Mm-hmm. Well, I like Towering Inferno. You don't like Towering Inferno?
Okay, I love to watch Towering Inferno. Absolutely love it. It's a lot of fun, but it is just a cheesy disaster film. It's not the best
film.
It's no
cheesier than the Poseidon Adventure, but okay.
Well, I love the Poseidon Adventure. And this was the same year as Earthquake, and I will say Earthquake was not nearly as good as this movie.
As Chinatown?
Even the special effects on No. Earthquake was not nearly as good as the Towering Inferno.
Oh, yeah, I agree with you.
Because the special effects in Earthquake were just awful. It was also the year of the trial of Billy Jack, and for those that know the Billy Jack series, it did not age well in any way, shape, or form.
Well, Billy Jack was actually the movie that brought on the marketing mentality. They poured all of this money and they opened it incredibly wide, and it made a huge amount of money compared with its budget. And that's what really started the blockbuster mentality, and then Jaws just took it to the next level.
This movie was nominated for Oscar. It was up against Godfather 2, The Conversation, Lenny, and The Towering Inferno.
Mm-hmm.
Did the Godfather 2...
The Godfather 2 won, yes. It was Chinatown was nominated for 11 Oscars, and it won one.
Yeah,
one Oscar.
It was nominated for Best Movie, was nominated for Best Actor, Best Actress for Faye Dunaway, Best Director Roman Polanski. It only won for Best Original Screenplay. Well deserved.
Well deserved, however, and we're going to get into this, there are many articles out there now, mostly due to Sam Wasson's incredible book, The Big Goodbye, that Robert Towne's Oscar may be listed with an asterisk.
Oh. Because
he had some help on this screenplay. And here's the thing, and I don't want to get too much into this now because I want to talk about it a little bit later, but filmmaking is a collaborative effort. You know, there are very few screenplays that are written by one person. Yeah. So it's kind of unfair to come after Robert Towne and say, did he really deserve the single Oscar for this screenplay? The point is that no matter what help he got from Roman Polanski helped him. Actually, Roman Polanski wrote the ending. It was a different ending in Robert Towne's original script. It was still Robert Towne's baby. Robert Towne still created it. He still came up with the idea. He is the one who formed it and brought it to Robert Evans. So he deserves the credit, even though he might have gotten some assistance in the writing of it.
Good Will Hunting is well known for being a movie where Matt and Ben get a lot of credit for the writing. And it's a great movie, but it changed a lot from their original script.
Yeah, well, all movies do. I mean, when you go through the history of any movie, you know, and Edward Taylor, who is the friend of Robert Towne's, that Robert Towne called him his quote-unquote editor. He was a lifelong friend of Robert Towne's, and he worked with Robert Towne on all of his screenplays. All of them. So, and he did not want credit for anything. This was on him, and his family urged him to get credit. Why aren't you getting credit for all this work that you're helping to create? And Robert Towne's, you know, reputation in Hollywood is legendary. As we just said, this script is like the Torah. You know, it's taught in film schools. People come to this screenplay to learn what a great screenplay looks like. So, you know, you have to take that with a grain of salt. It's Robert Towne's script. It's Robert Towne's Oscar. And my God, what an incredible movie he created.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's incredible. But here's another thing, too. So Roman Polanski was the director. You know, when we look at films, you know, it never says, it doesn't say Robert Towne's Chinatown. It doesn't say Robert Evans' Chinatown. It's Roman Polanski's Chinatown. The director is the final arbiter.
Yep.
A film by Roman Polanski. So there's many films. When we're talking about Postcards from the Edge, and we were saying there were scenes that Carrie Fisher didn't like in the movie. And you're like, well, she's a screenwriter. Then why did she write them? Well, she didn't. Mike Nichols created them, and Mike Nichols is the director and the final arbiter. So you have to remember that when you're looking at a film, when you're looking at screenplay by, you have to remember the director and maybe some other people also had a huge hand in creating this film that you're watching.
And I don't know how true to actual history this movie is, but the movie Saving Mr. Banks, which was about the making of Mary Poppins.
Right.
And I can't remember the name of the woman that wrote the Mary Poppins series.
P.L. Travers.
Okay, now in this movie, she is actively involved in the making of this film. And like I said, it may be totally fiction, but it gives you an idea why studios and directors and producers do not want the original writer involved in making a movie in any way.
Yeah, well, she was a curmudgeon of the nth degree, and there's a lot of liberties taken with that film, but she really was a real pill to work with. But we're not talking about Saving Mr. Banks. We're talking about Chinatown. And a lot of Chinatown, and here's the thing about Chinatown is, and I think that people, I don't want to give a big history of, I'm more interested in telling the history of the film, not the history behind the film. But, you know, it's based on real events that happened in Los Angeles, the real life water wars that happened because Los Angeles is a desert. I mean, that's the most important thing you have to remember. And there ain't a lot of water in a desert. So all the water that you see in Los Angeles was brought here. You know, just like the people that live here, everybody's a transplant here, including the water. So when Los Angeles was being formed in the early 20th century, they realized in order for this town to really grow, they needed water. But where were they going to get it? I mean, the Los Angeles River is a joke.
Yeah.
You know, it's always dry, except after a very heavy rain. So it doesn't have enough water to sustain a city. So what they did was they had to look to the north. And they looked north about 230 miles to the Owens Valley in the Owens River, which had runoff from the eastern Sierra Nevada mountains. Well, how do you get water from a place that's 230 miles away? Well, that's where William Mulholland comes in. Now, a lot of people who live in Los Angeles will obviously know the name William Mulholland. And it was William Mulholland's idea to create an aqueduct from the Owens Valley to Los Angeles, 233 miles. And under his leadership, the Los Angeles Aqueduct was built and brought the water from the Owens Valley, whenever it begins, to the northern reaches of the San Fernando Valley. And it is just a gravity flow water. There is no power behind it. The power behind it's purely gravity. So there was a syndicate in LA that bought up the land in the San Fernando Valley where the aqueduct ended, because it was basically desert land. It wasn't worthless, but it wasn't worth much. So this is where Chinatown kind of comes into. There was a syndicate which bought up this land because they knew it would become very valuable. They had the information of the aqueduct coming down. They knew it would be very valuable, and they would make a huge profit once it was irrigated with this water from the Owens Valley. So the back and forth between LA and the Owens Valley became known as the California Water Wars, and is really what is the spark plug for Chinatown.
Let me go a little more deep into it because I'm kind of a history buff and I'm actually writing.
Oh, so I was just telling you the history and you're like, no, this is really what happened.
Well, no, we're telling everybody. I'm actually writing a novel about the same time period, a real event that I'm changing a little bit, almost identical to what this film did, though it's nothing to do with the water rights. So this just really attracts me. And Mulholland, one of the most beautiful drives in LA, the Mulholland Drive, is named after this lecherous individual. He and former Mayor Fred Eaton's were actually involved in this whole buyout scandal. And what happened in 1928, as in the movie is referenced very quickly, the St. Francis Dam broke and killed 431 people. About a quarter of those were children. Mulholland took full responsibility, and he died in 1935, disgraced and living in seclusion. So it's really surprising that we still have so many things that are named after him.
Mm-hmm.
For those that are nowhere near LA, here's an idea. You've heard of the Valley, which is the San Fernando Valley. It's on the opposite side of the Hollywood Hills from the rest of LA. The reason why LA is so spread out, for a city, the second largest city in the country, our downtown is laughable.
Yeah.
And the reason that is because of these water rights. LA took the water. And these small towns and villages that were in the valley were like, LA, you've got to make us part of LA. They had no other option.
Mm-hmm.
Annex us so we can survive.
Right.
And that's how LA spread so quickly.
Exactly.
That's why there's not really a central. It's like a conglomeration of communities. People see these highways that are jam-packed and they wonder how people in LA deal with this every day. Most of us don't. We live and work in our own little community. There are some that commute every day, but most don't. So that's how it all got spread out. I'm probably getting a little weeds, but it's a big deal for me.
Well, no, it's fascinating.
I love LA history. And I will say this movie is a love letter to LA.
It is a love letter to the LA of the 30s.
Yes.
LA of the 30s. And that's one of the things that sparked Robert Towne. You have to understand that the time that Chinatown, the movie, was created, there's two major driving forces, I think it's safe to say, behind the creation of the film Chinatown. The first one is Watergate, obviously, happened at the same time it was being developed and filmed. Corruption at the highest level. That's what Chinatown's about. The second one, and probably the most important one, were the Manson murders. Because in 1969, when Charles Manson's family bludgeoned Roman Polanski's wife, his pregnant wife, Sharon Tate, to death, this entire, and five of her friends, this entire town went into lockdown. The paranoia covered the town because there was no rhyme or reason to this senseless, heinous act, this butchery that happened. So this entire town went into, and a real sense of paranoia came over the town. By the way, they were all connected to Sharon Tate in some way or another. We just talked about Roman Polanski, Sharon Tate's husband. Robert Evans knew Sharon Tate because he was very close with Roman Polanski. They had done Rosemary's Baby together. Jack Nicholson was supposed to be in the film The Day of the Dolphin with Sharon Tate that was going to be directed by Roman Polanski. It later ended up being directed by Mike Nichols. Robert Towne's wife had dinner with Sharon Tate right before the murder. So it's all connected. So there's no way to overstate the effect that the Manson murders had on Hollywood and what it did to people. And Robert Towne grew up, he was a Los Angeles native. He grew up in LA and he was remembering the times of his childhood. He was having a real nostalgic trip for his life as a child in the 30s and 40s, which is where Chinatown, the idea for Chinatown, came from in his mind. He said there were two sources. One of them was this article that was called Raymond Chandler's LA. And it was basically a photo shoot that was a contemporary photo shoot, but was done in the style of a Raymond Chandler novel, detective story. And he realized that you could still find parts of Raymond Chandler's LA in his modern day LA. And that gave him the idea of doing a detective story utilizing the locations you could still find that would give a really authentic look of Los Angeles in the 30s. And the second one was Carey McWilliams' book, Southern California Country, An Island on the Land, which is basically the history of Southern California. And in a letter to McWilliams, Towne said that Southern California Country really changed his life because it taught him to look at the place where he was born, and it convinced him to write about it. Thus, Chinatown.
And what's funny, I kept having to remind myself this was not written by Raymond Chandler.
Yeah.
I knew better, but it is so Chandler-esque. It's so Philip Marlowe.
Oh, very much so.
Oh, it's just...
And he was good friends with Jack Nicholson. He'd known Jack Nicholson they were best friends. He went to acting classes with Jack Nicholson in the 50s. And by this time, Jack Nicholson had done 5 Easy Pieces and was a big star. And he said, I want to write a detective story for Jack. That's how that started. But it's really hard to overstate the effect that the Manson murders had on Chinatown. Because what is Chinatown about, the theme of Chinatown? Because there's one scene that takes place in Chinatown. So when people would ask Robert Towne, what is Chinatown? He would always say, Chinatown is a state of mind. It's a metaphor for the futility of good intentions. It's the inevitability of defeat. So basically, you're trying to help someone, and in helping them, you're actually doing the reverse. And that's what happens in this film to Jack Nicholson's character, J.J. Gittes.
And in the original script, there was no Chinatown scene in the movie.
Right.
So this has nothing really to do with Chinatown other than what Tony said, and Jack Nicholson's character had bad memories of what happened there. But really, that's the only reason. I mean, people will probably scratch their heads and wonder, why is this called Chinatown? That's the reason.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason why people had a lot of difficulty understanding this script. Many people said to him, Robert Evans said to him, well, where's Chinatown in this? The movie's called Chinatown. And Robert Towne tried to explain to Robert Evans that exactly it, that it's a state of mind. So they did end up putting that final scene in Chinatown because Chinatown represents, as we just said, the futility of good intentions. And Jack Nicholson's character, J.J. Gittes, did have an experience in Chinatown where he thought he was helping someone. And he ended up doing the exact opposite. And it haunts him. And what happens? It happens again in this movie. And did you know how he came up with the idea of Chinatown? His talk to the vice cop in Chinatown?
No.
Robert Towne?
Nope.
He was buying a dog, basically. This was after the Manson murders, and he was thinking we should probably at least have a dog. And he went to buy it. The breeder ended up being a vice cop in L.A., and he was talking to him. He said, what do you do? And he goes, oh, I'm a vice cop. Oh, where do you work? I work in Chinatown. And he said, what do you do in Chinatown? And he said, as little as possible. And that struck Robert Towne, and he was like, why? What does that mean? And he said, the vice cop said to him, you can't get inside the culture in Chinatown. With all the different tongues and languages, you can't tell whether or not you're preventing a crime or your interference is actually helping someone commit a crime. Mm-hmm. And it's that kind of spider's web, illusionary area in your mind where you're not really sure what is going on. That's Chinatown. Chinatown is this place where you're not really sure. It's like a hall of mirrors. You're not really sure what's happening, what's going on. And the best thing to do, and this line is in the movie, is as little as possible.
So should I give a rundown of the film? Very brief.
Yeah, I want you to, because I'm not going to attempt it. So you go ahead.
Okay. This is a 1974 rom-com.
With Ryan O'Neal and Bartman.
No, it's a 1974 mystery suspense, directed by Roman Polanski, as we said, starring Jack Nicholson, Faye Dunaway, and John Huston. I'm going to set the tone for this film. In the film, Jack Nicholson's character is asked, "Are you alone?" And his response is, "Isn't everybody?" And that is the tone of this film, because it's not. This is a very uncomfortable film. It's a beautiful film, but it's uncomfortable.
Gorgeous film.
The story takes place in 1937 Los Angeles, which is about 10 years after the events that Tony and I just talked about. Jack Nicholson is Jake Gittes, a PI who specializes in cheating spouse cases. He is hired by the wife, air quotes, of Hollis Mulray, because she thinks he is cheating on her. Well, Mulray winds up dead, and surprise, surprise, it wasn't Mulray's wife that hired him. It was, that's actually part of the mystery. Who was this person that hired him? And it was not his real wife, who was played by Faye Dunaway. As we said, it's loosely based on this whole, the water rights issue. So the question really throughout the film is, was Mulray murdered because of his personal life? Was he murdered because of his professional life? Was it a mix of both? There are so many twists and turns and surprises in this film.
Yes, it's an onion. It's a big, dirty, evil onion. And Jake Gittes, he pulls away one layer after another, and it just gets more and more and more complicated the more he finds out. He thinks he knows it. And actually, we'll definitely talk about John Huston. But John Huston's character says to him, point blank, you don't know what you're dealing with. And this is J.J. Gittes. This is Jack Nicholson's tragic flaw, his hubris. He thinks he's smarter than everybody. He's a wonderful character, by the way. He's a very appealing character. Jack Nicholson has never been more appealing, in my opinion. I think he's very handsome in this film. He dresses. He's a popinjay, as they say. He likes to look good, just like Jack Nicholson. He's a very appealing character, but he thinks he knows what's going on. He thinks he knows better than everybody, and he's going to be a big hero in the end. And as it turns out, he's always one step behind. And his hubris in thinking he can become the big hero is what eventually causes the tragedy at the very end of the film. And that is the very essence and the very definition of Chinatown that we just said, the futility of good intentions. You think you're doing something to help someone, and you actually end up doing the exact opposite.
To speak on John Huston, I got to say, when it comes to movie villains and evil, you have Hannibal Lecter, you have Norman Bates, you have Darth Vader, you have Freddy Krueger, you have Jason. These are all villains, good and bad, well done. What makes his character so terrifying and so horrible is he's real.
Yeah.
You believe this is a real person. So he's far more terrifying than the others I just mentioned.
Well, he's a sociopath.
Oh, yeah.
And he believes he's above the law, but he doesn't come off that way. He doesn't appear that way. He's the ultimate evil because he doesn't appear evil. On the surface, he appears to be a pleasant, jovial, multi-billionaire who's just trying to do his best in life. And he's not. He ends up being the ultimate evil. So yeah, he is the ultimate. And you don't realize he's the ultimate villain until the very end of the film, which is what's so devastating and what he's done to his daughter, Faye Dunaway, Evelyn Mulwray, is not revealed until the end. And it's the big secret of Chinatown. It's the big spoiler alert of Chinatown. So we have this mystery going on about water and all this government corruption when you realize that the real story here, the real tragedy underneath is this family crime that has been committed.
Diversion.
Pardon me?
Great diversion.
It's a great diversion, but you realize that's when his character says to J.J. Gittes, you have no idea what you're getting involved with. He means it. He does have no idea. And when he finds it out at the end, it's stunning.
And John Huston's character, I have said many, many, many times that Satan will not show up with a ponytail and a pitchfork.
No.
And this fits that scenario because he seems like a kindly old rich man.
He does.
Kind of a good old boy, actually.
Yeah, well, he's a very charming, very, easygoing. On the surface, he appears to be this pleasant, jovial guy, and he's anything but when you find out what he's done. There's so many things about this movie which are... Originally, Robert Towne was going to call John Huston's character Julian Cross for JC. You know who the ultimate JC is because this film has these kind of incredible biblical allusions but he changed the name to Noah because Noah, who's the most famous Noah of all? The Noah that was involved in that flood. So, I mean, it's incredible the layers in Chinatown and the allusions to these things, which make it even more than just a story because you have these biblical references to this character who is the ultimate evil.
Tony, I'm stopping our conversation real quick.
Why? Brett, we're in the middle of a podcast.
But this is about the podcast, and it's very important.
Okay.
Listener, whatever app you're listening on, whether it's on the computer or on the phone, reach your finger or your mouse over. It usually says follow. Some still say subscribe. And click that. And what's going to happen when they do that, Tony?
They're going to get notified when a new episode is available, and they can listen to us again. You don't want to miss that.
No.
Can we get back to the episode that we were recording?
Of course.
Please?
Of course.
All right. Thank you. Don't forget to subscribe and follow.
There you go.
So we talked a little bit about Jack Nicholson's character, J.J. Gittes, who's a private detective, as Brad said, in Los Angeles. He used to be a cop. And he worked in Chinatown. That's part of his history. And as I said to you earlier, something happened in Chinatown. We don't really find out exactly what happened, but we find out that it was exactly that exactly that, the good intentions, it's the tragedy of good intentions, the futility of good intentions.
And the details are unnecessary, and I'm glad they didn't go into the details. They told us just enough we need to know.
Yeah, exactly. So he has a history with Chinatown. And so the thing about J.J. Gittes is first of all, the name J.J. Gittes is inspired by Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson's first name is John Joseph Nicholson. So there's your J.J. And the Gittes is from a producer friend of his named Harold Gittes. So they thought that was a really great name for a character. It's just J.J. Gittes. And John Huston's character always calls him Gitz. He doesn't say Gittes. And that's a clue right there that John Huston's character does what he wants. He does not care, but that's just a minor little point that you get if you have to watch it and you have to see that. Faye Dunaway plays Evelyn Mulray. Evelyn Mulray, at first glance, is your typical film noir femme fatale from her very first appearance. And she's gorgeous. God, Faye Dunaway is beautiful in this film. Just gorgeous.
She's striking. Striking is a good word.
She's striking. She's like Dietrich in this film. I mean, she's so beautiful in this movie. And what's wonderful about this is, she makes her first appearance and you think she's, the classic trope from film noir, the femme fatale. Well, femme fatales in these movies usually are the ones who take everybody in. They think they're innocent and good. And at the end, they end up being the cause of destruction. It's just the reverse. So Towne takes that classic film noir trope of the femme fatale and turns it on his head. Because you think she's no good. You think maybe she murdered her husband. And you find out that she's the only innocent one in all this. She's the one who's the victim of this. And that's another astounding thing that is in this film, that Towne put in this film. Another surprise that you don't expect. And boy, does it knock you on your ass. Yeah.
It's like, oh my God. And I had forgotten. All I remembered is how much I love this movie. And because, I've told you before, I remember if I loved them or hated them, but I don't remember the details, which is kind of nice when I watch them again.
Yeah, it's kind of like you can see it for the first time.
Yeah. And I was just disgusted. I was just as disgusted as the first time.
Did you actually forget the twist?
Yes.
You did? Oh my God. How can you possibly forget that?
Well, I was on vacation last week.
Yes.
So I watched it with my sister and my brother. My sister was asleep in 5 minutes, but it had nothing to do with the film. But my brother when I kept bringing up the film during the week, he kept saying, it's a good movie. I kind of remembered. I don't think it was as great as everybody said. He was so engrossed in this film. He just was on the edge of his seat. But when it ended with its very dark ending, he said, this is why I remember I didn't like the film.
Right, with the ending. Well, yeah, that was a bone of contention because in the original script, the ending was different. That's Roman Polanski's ending. Robert Towne actually left the production because he was fighting with Roman Polanski so much about the ending. In the original ending of Robert Towne's script, Evelyn Mulray kills her father. Her daughter, here's the spoiler alert, also her sister, is safe, and she goes to prison. But you feel like evil has been taken care of. That doesn't happen in the movie. Roman Polanski, you got to come off it from Roman Polanski. This was a guy who knew horror. And I mean, in his life. He also knew horror in Rosemary's Baby, but he knew horror. He knew tragedy. He was a child of the Holocaust. His mother was killed in the Holocaust. And by the way, she was pregnant when she was killed.
Oh, dear.
His wife, Sharon Tate, was butchered, and she was also pregnant when she was butchered to death.
And I'm thinking of Rosemary's Baby now.
Yeah, well, this is a man who knew evil. So, and what Roman Polanski said was, no, in order for people to think, you want people to think when they leave a movie, you give them an ending that they don't like and they don't expect. Roman Polanski knew that despite your best intentions, and despite how many times you pick yourself up and dust yourself off and start all over again, life can kick you in the balls and evil can triumph. And that's why this ending of Chinatown, the Chinatown ending that we see now, of Evelyn being killed and her daughter / sister being now in the care of the man who raped her when she was 15 years old. That's why the very end, when
grandfather / father.
Yes. That's why at the very end, when Jack Nicholson is standing there in utter disbelief of what's happened, the very famous final line, forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. Because That's what happens in Chinatown. Chinatown is the metaphor for the futility of good intentions. J.J. Gittes thought he was doing something great. He was going to be the big hero, but he didn't know what he was dealing with. And in the end, he allowed or he facilitated the triumph of evil.
In an interview, Polanski said regarding the ending of this movie ending so unhappily, he said, without that, we wouldn't be sitting around talking about it.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's what I meant when he said, if you want an audience to leave a theater talking about your movie, you give them an ending, which is not what they expected, not what they wanted. Everybody wants evil to be taken care of. But Roman Polanski knew, he dealt with it in his childhood. He dealt with it with the murder of his wife, that evil prevails and evil is all over. That's what's so, I don't know, first of all, how you could forget the twist in Chinatown. That really surprises me, because here's as I just said, Evelyn Mulwray, who we think is the femme fatale, is not. She is the daughter of Noah Cross, who raped her when she was 15 years old, got her pregnant, and she has a child. So one of the red herrings in Chinatown, when J.J. Gittes is first hired by the fake Evelyn Mulwray, who's a fabulous Diane Ladd. She's an actress who's been hired to impersonate Evelyn Mulwray. So when Jake's hired by her, she says it's because he's cheating, and she wants photos, because that's what he does. That's what J.J. Gittes does. He's a detective who follows cheating husbands and cheating wives. And so Hollis Mulwray, Evelyn's husband, is seen with this young girl, and everybody assumes, we the audience assume, the first time we watch Chinatown, that this is the chippy that he is, cheating on his wife with. Well, it turns out Evelyn Mulwray was not the right Evelyn Mulwray. She was an actress who was hired to impersonate her. And that chippy was not his girlfriend. It was his stepdaughter, who's also his stepniece. Is that right? Is that how that would go?
Yeah, I guess so. Or, boy, it's hard to say.
Sister, daughter. Yes. Who's also his sister-in-law. His stepdaughter is also his sister-in-law. My sister, my daughter, my sister, my daughter.
Yeah.
In the famous scene where Jack Nicholson is slapping Faye Dunaway around, and you've seen it parodied a million times. I think it was parodied on Will and Grace one time, where he's trying to find out, who is this girl that you're protecting? Who is this girl? And she had previously, Faye Dunaway had told him that she was her sister, and he found out she didn't have a sister. She goes, well, she's my daughter. And he says, you don't have a daughter. And he slaps her. And she goes, she's my sister. Slap. My daughter. Slap. Sister. Slap. Daughter. She's my sister and my daughter. And that's the moment of horror in Chinatown, when you realize,
he should have won an Oscar from the look on his face when she said that and he realized what it was.
Oh my God, yeah. Oh my God, yeah. And how about Faye Dunaway? Faye Dunaway gets a lot of grief. We all know this. There's a really good documentary about her on HBO right now. I recommend it because, yeah, she's a little crazy, but she's also a brilliant actress. And here's the thing. Say what you want to about Faye Dunaway. And yes, a lot of people don't like her. She was very difficult to work with. She had her battles with Roman Polanski, but Jack Nicholson wanted her in the film because she's perfect in the film. And she said to Jack before that scene, Jack, you just have to hit me. There's no faking this. This is too important. So here's an actress who, kind of like Vivien Leigh in Streetcar Named Desire, who would crawl on broken glass to get a performance right. Kind of Faye Dunaway. Of course, Faye Dunaway would have everybody else crawl on the broken glass with her to get it right. But she was very committed to making this film work and making this character work. So much so that Jack Nicholson was really slugging her. And you can see it. I mean, she is shaken at the end of that movie. But God, what a scene. What you had to have it that way.
Yeah, I've heard he felt guilty doing that because she insisted they do so.
Right, but they were friends. They used to hang out. And it's funny, there are a lot of the people who were considered. Jane Fonda was Evan's first choice was Jane Fonda. But Jane Fonda, like so many people this script was brought to, didn't understand it. She didn't understand the story. So Jane Fonda passed. But Polanski always wanted Faye Dunaway. Nicholson always wanted Faye Dunaway. And God, she's perfect in this. You feel for that character so much. She gives you such sympathy. I don't know that there's ever been another Faye Dunaway performance where you felt such sympathy and sorrow for one of her characters.
You feel sympathy, but really, this is one reason I think also people don't like Faye Dunaway is she's also very unlikable through most of the film. And she's the same way in Network. She's just a very harsh.
Oh, I
person.
totally.
And you know, both of these movies are two of my top films, and I don't like her through most of both.
I
of them.
totally disagree with you.
Oh, you do?
She is nothing. She is nothing like this as she is in Network. In Network, she's basically Noah Cross in Network. She's the evil one in Network.
Well, yeah.
You have such.
Oh, I'm not saying it's the same character at all.
No, I don't find her annoying. I find her so touching. In the beginning of this movie, she's very cold and very distant. And yes, you see, you know, she goes, I don't get tough with people. My lawyer does. So she's playing that femme fatale. But as the movie goes on and you learn more about her and you see her vulnerabilities and you see this is a woman who is very shaken. She can never say father. She always hesitates before she says my father. Or she stumbles over the word. And, you know, that was a choice of Faye Dunaway's, and it drove Roman Polanski a little crazy because apparently they had to go through tons and tons of footage to find a decent my father take from Faye Dunaway, but she got it. You have such sympathy for her that the moment when she has the love scene with Jack Nicholson and they kiss and she's in bed with him, in my opinion, she's so soft. She's so loving. You see this woman who's been hurt. You see this victim, even though you don't know what causes this hurt, and you find out later, you know, the most horrific act of all. I find her so incredibly sympathetic. So in the end, when she's shot, it's devastating. It's devastating.
It is devastating. Part of it is her persona, but I agree she's a very sympathetic character. But every time you start to feel sympathy, again, they give us a distraction. You know, there's so many great deceptions that because you start to like her, you start to soften to her, and then Geddes looks in the window of the home and you don't know it's her daughter at the time, but you see this distressed woman on the bed, and then it looks like she's evil again. And it goes back and forth and back and forth. They're so good at that. You know, the very first twist is really after he's hired and he's following Mulray around, and Mulray's just walking all over the place, walking around the dry riverbeds and down by the ocean. And you realize this guy isn't having an affair. And then the next thing you know, he's in this boat with this young woman, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, he is having an affair.
Yeah. Well, it's
again another distraction.
Well, that's Chinatown. That's the illusion of Chinatown. You know, that's what makes this screenplay so brilliant. Is that you just go down all these roads that you didn't expect to go down, and it leads to another road and another road and another road. It's a maze until you just get lost in all the duplicity and all of the lies and all of the cover-ups. And that's why a lot of people, didn't understand this film when it was presented to them, because it is very complex. And you really have to think about, okay, what is going on here? And, when you find out that Evelyn has been raped by her father, and this is her daughter and her sister, and you realize, oh my God, this is the ultimate evil that has landed on this poor woman. And then in the end, she gets killed and evil triumphs. It's devastating. It's one of those movies where you sit there and you just sit there for like 10 minutes afterwards and going, what did I just see? What just happened? It's incredible. I
was so repulsed when this movie, sitting there watching, first of all, Faye Dunaway murdered, killed by the cops, and lying on her steering wheel. Her daughter is then screaming, pulled out of the car by her grandfather, who she was born from incestuous rape, and now he has custody of her.
Yeah.
It was so disgusting. And I gotta say, I hated this film because of its depressing ending, and I loved this film because of its depressing ending. And the reason is, I don't want to reflect back on my own writing because I wish I could write like this. But one thing I tell my readers all the time is, I will never promise you a happy ending.
Yeah.
The only guarantee I will give you is the crime will be solved. Beyond that, I will not give, because I don't want you to know. I want to keep you guessing. You never know if it's going to be a happy ending or a sad ending. And that's what I loved about this. I'm so tired of Hollywood always thinking they have to give us happy endings. Surprise me.
That was kind of Roman Polanski's point. It was like, no, there's only one, from a man who knew evil personally, who had evil visited upon him many times. And whatever you think of Roman Polanski and what happened later in his life, that's what we're not talking about that.
Yeah, I don't want to go there.
I'm talking about Roman Polanski in 1974 and what he had dealt with in his life. He knew evil. So, in so many ways, he was the perfect person to direct this film, and and that ending is when you think about it, Robert Towne wanted a happier ending, not a happy ending, but a happier ending, at least where, Noah Cross is killed. And now we have an ending where the victim is killed. Hello, Chinatown, you really do think about it. It really makes you think about this film over and over again. And what did I just see? And it's just the futility of life at times, sometimes. It's stunning.
Now, I'm going to shock you here, as I'm going to shock probably many people.
Yeah.
I have never been a fan of Jack Nicholson. In fact, I've always told people I hate Jack Nicholson. And there's a reason for that. I didn't like, what was the movie where the women were...
The Witches of Eastwick.
The Witches of Eastwick. I hated that film. I didn't like him in As Good as It Gets, so he did play the character well. There's other movies I didn't like him in. And so I always had in my head that I don't like Jack Nicholson. And I'm not a huge fan of Easy Rider. It's a good film, but I think it's overrated. But then I think back to this film, and I think back to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and some of the other ones that he's been in. And I realized, no, I like him. I just didn't like those particular roles. And they're the ones that, for whatever reason, stuck with me. This guy is amazing. And I've never understood the attraction to Jack Nicholson. But boy, this movie, wow, he looked great. He looked
he did.
Incredible.
I think what you're saying is that you don't like the caricature of Jack Nicholson.
Yes.
I mean,
that is exactly it.
It's what he became, the shining Jack Nicholson, that kind of, well, we know what the character of Jack Nicholson is.
And yeah, The Shining is one of my most hated films.
It's the caricature.
I'm glad I'm in there because Stephen King doesn't like it either. The original version. I also think of one movie that I absolutely loved him in, As Good as It Gets.
He became such a caricature, and he perpetuated that character.
You are 100%
After
correct.
Chinatown, he did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. In fact, there's a funny story about during the Oscars, during the Academy Awards that Chinatown was nominated for, the 74 Academy Award, when they announced the best actor, and it went to Art Carney, and everybody, for Harry and Tonto, and everybody was like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, you had Al Pacino, you had Jack Nicholson nominated, and went to Art Carney for Harry and Tonto. And Jack, someone, leaned up to comfort Jack, and Jack said, don't worry about it. I'll get it for Cuckoo's Nest. I can't do Jack Nicholson, so I'm not going to try. He had just filmed One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So he knew he would get it for Cuckoo's Nest, and he did. And then after Cuckoo's Nest, he kind of lost motivation. He'd done this incredible string of films, The Last Detail, Chinatown, 5 Easy Pieces, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest being kind of like the apex. He gets the Oscar. And then he started doing these kind of, your Witches of Eastwick, your things where he was a caricature. I love him in terms of endearment, but he's a supporting character in terms of endearment. I like him in As Good as It Gets as well. So there were glimpses of the old Jack Nicholson, but this was really him in his prime era. And like you, I never thought of myself as a Jack Nicholson fan, but I love him in this. I think he is so charming. His character is so engrossing. And, there's also the scene where this is an interesting thing. So this was really his first film as a romantic leading man. Now you look at Jack Nicholson, you don't think of him that way, but people do, as you just pointed out. A lot of people think of him as people love him. People love him. And so his first film was a romantic leading man, and he spends over half of it with a big bandage on his nose because his nose has been slit by Roman Polanski, as it turns out. That part was played. The thug was Roman Polanski. So he gets his nose slit because that's what happens to nosy guys. You know what happens to nosy guys? They lose their noses. And so he spends half of the movie in this romantic film with a big bandage over his nose. And it's actually a very funny scene. But there's so many interesting things about this, little tidbits about this film that I would just like to point out a couple of them. So at the time, speaking of Jack Nicholson and romantic, he was dating Angelica Houston for years. He and Angelica Houston were involved in a relationship for years. And of course, Angelica Houston is the daughter of John Huston. So Angelica Houston was on the set the day they were filming the first encounter between Noah Cross and J.J. Gittes. And Noah Cross has a line to J.J. where he says, "You're sleeping with my daughter." And so it's kind of meta. It's kind of a meta moment in that film, which I think is really kind of funny.
What I think really shows the talent of Jack Nicholson in this movie, Jake has so many great lines. He puts people down in such beautiful ways. His insults are just incredible. Yeah. And it could have sounded kind of sticky in the wrong actor. And he does it. It's so natural. And Jake is he is so likable and so kind, and he's so violent and so brutal. And it all seems very natural. You know this guy, and you kind of like this guy, and sometimes you think I shouldn't like this guy.
You like this guy, you do, and you want him to be triumphant. But what's his problem? That tragic flaw. Yeah. You know, in classical drama, there's the hero with the tragic flaw, and his tragic flaw is his hubris. He thinks he knows more than he does, and he doesn't listen to people when they tell him to forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. He doesn't. He wants to be the big hero, and that's his ultimate downfall. And he pays the ultimate price when the woman that he's falling in love with is murdered because of him, because he told her to come to Chinatown. So it's really... It's so wonderful. What I love about this film is, too, as you said, some of his lines could be really hokey, but here's what's brilliant about this film is that it is a noir. It's a film noir. Mm-hmm. So but what they wanted to do when they wanted to make this detective film, Valentine to Los Angeles, was film it very much in that style, but do the things you couldn't get away with in 1940s detective stories that you could get away with in 1974. Obviously, there's not going to be any incest in a 1944 detective story. No. So what's great about Chinatown is that you're kind of watching this old film noir, but it's modern film noir. The colors are gorgeous. He uses these wide anamorphic lenses, which keeps everything in focus when they want it to be in focus. So you can see stuff going on in the background, which is very important, and you should pay attention to it, but also you can see what's going on in the foreground, so that's fabulous. The production design, as I said before, Richard Sylbert, one of the greatest production designers ever. He designed Virginia Woolf, The Graduate, Rosemary's Baby. This is all this Paramount crew under Robert Evans. I want to talk a little bit about Robert Evans.
Okay.
Do you know much about Robert Evans?
No, I know very little. Educate me.
I find him such a fascinating character. He is one of those, he's a throwback to the old movie guys. He's a throwback to the Jack Warners who were flashy and, talked big, but believed in movies. They ate, slept, and breathed movies. And that was Robert Evans. He was a really, he wore the wide lapels. You can almost smell the Aqua Velva when you see Robert Evans. I mean, he's that kind of a 70s player, married to Alan McGraw, but he loved movies so much, and he was the head of production at Paramount. They created these incredible run of films that we just talked about. And Chinatown was his first production, not only as head of the studio, but as a producer. He personally produced Chinatown. Now, this happened sometimes in the golden era with Jack Warner personally produced a couple films, and so did Daryl Zanuck. But this didn't happen in Hollywood, and this pissed a lot of people off because it's kind of like what's it called? It's kind of like a conflict of interest when you have the studio chief who's also a producer. Well, what movie do you think is going to get all the attention? The movie that you're personally producing is going to get it. So this pissed a lot of people off. So he had to leave Paramount after this. And he did some independent films that were success, but he had a real tragic downfall. And I think if you get a chance to, there's a great documentary on Robert Evans called The Kid Stays in the Picture. It talks all about his career, first as an actor, discovered by Norma Shearer at the pool of the Beverly Hills Hotel, through this whole great run of films he had, through Love Story, through the Godfather saga. He developed all these. He nurtured all of these. And now he's kind of thought of as a joke. And I think that's unfortunate because what a great filmmaker. He's responsible for these films. He's responsible for this film for sure. And I think he needs to be better known.
I'm looking at his filmography while you're talking. If you look at it, it's so hit or miss. You have this film. You have Marathon Man, which is a brilliant film. You have Black Sunday, which sucked. You have Urban Cowboy, great film. Then you have The Two Jakes, which is a sequel to this one. It sucked. You also have Popeye, which is one of the worst movies ever made. He's just like
yes,
find your place here.
Well, Chinatown was his zenith. But look at the movies before. Look at the movies before Chinatown. Look at Rosemary's Baby. Look at Harold and Maude. Look at The Godfather. Both of them. Look at Love Story. We're talking about the films up to Chinatown, and then after Chinatown, like so many of these people. Same thing with Roman Polanski. I mean, Roman Polanski had personal issues, which happened, but a lot of these people really hit their peak with Chinatown or soon after. Now, Faye Dunaway obviously went on to Network. and won her Oscar. And then she had her downfall. But what I'm trying to say about Robert Evans is that he gets so much attention now for being this kind of a caricature 70s producer. As I said, you can smell the aqua velva. But he, as I said, he ate, breathed, and slept movies. And we don't have that anymore. We do not have that anymore. That kind of romantic sense of Hollywood is gone.
The Hollywood that you loved and moved out here for.
Yeah, I love this Hollywood. This Hollywood, I was alive during this Hollywood. I had no knowledge of it, but this is a fabulous, because these people were just like those people back in the Hollywood I love, back in classic Hollywood. Movies were in their blood. And they were so passionate about them. And that's what makes this film so... Can you imagine somebody pitching this movie today? Can you imagine Robert Towne going to a producer and going, yeah, so anyway, it's about the water in Los Angeles and who owns it and who doesn't. And oh, by the way, there's an ancestral relationship between a father and his daughter. And they all end up... And she ends up dead in the end. I mean, who's going to buy that? No. Robert Evans did. Even though he didn't understand it, like all these other people, he bought it. Incredible.
Film is a business. But there was this era when film was both a business and an art. And it seems like that art has pulled away and now it's just business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this was the end of it. This was the end of a certain Hollywood, which existed for a very brief amount of time and then was over. Robert Towne originally envisioned this as a trilogy, as you just said briefly. He actually wanted the second film in this trilogy. The second film was called The Two Jakes, which Brad just mentioned. He originally had the idea for The Two Jakes. Robert Evans wanted to produce The Two Jakes like shortly after Chinatown, but it didn't come together. Robert Towne wanted to direct it. That fell through. It went through turnaround hell. It was finally made in 1990, and it was not a success. So the third part of this story was going to be called Gittes versus Gittes, and it never even made it.
I heard it was going to be called Cloverleaf or something of that nature.
No, it was Chinatown. It was The Two Jakes and Gittes versus Gittes. But I hear there's something happening at Netflix, which might be a prequel to this, because this character, J.J. Gittes, he's unforgettable. Yeah. And you can understand why people keep returning to this character, because he is an unforgettable character and he just needs the right story.
And I want to go back to when I was saying that some of the dialogue is cheesy and it wouldn't have been done well. This is noir. And today, when they're made, it's very difficult not to make it sound like a farce. And that's really what it came down to for me. It didn't sound like a farce. It was so real. It was dead on.
Yeah.
It is beautiful.
Well, it's these incredibly gifted actors working at the top of their form, with an incredibly gifted director working at the top of his form, in this atmosphere of complete creative freedom that Robert Evans created at Paramount at this particular time. When they were filming Chinatown, on the soundstage next to them, they were filming The Godfather Part II. On the other side of the studio, the soundstage, they were filming The Day of the Locust. I mean, this is what was happening in this Hollywood. So when I talk about going back to classic Hollywood, and I want to see Woman of the Year, or The Philadelphia Story, or The More the Merrier, true. But I would take this Paramount. I would go back to Paramount and be, what an incredible era. What brought it down to was drugs, too. It was right before all the drugs. I mean, there were drugs, but not like it became. So, I mean, that's another big downfall of those people. They got a little too happy with the cocaine, and it didn't work out well. Yeah.
I want to get back to John Huston, because I'm always caught off guard when I see him in an acting role, because I think, like most people, I think of him as a director or producer, even
one of the greatest,
writer, which I know he did for quite a bit. But so I'm caught off guard when I see him as an actor. And as far as I know, this was his biggest acting role that I can recall. At least
definitely,
most memorable.
Definitely. Well, his father was a huge actor. John Huston's father, Walter Huston, was an incredible actor in the 30s and 40s. And so, Treasure of the Sierra Madre, Dodsworth, and then John specifically went the other direction. He went the writing and the acting. And my God, The African Queen, The Misfits, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. I mean, these films, John Huston is mythic. So near the end of his career, he would make a few cameo appearances. He did a cameo in a film called The Cardinal. And I think he also did he was in one of Orson Welles' final films as well. But no, this one, I mean, talk about, if you're going to act, this is the part to act, because my God, he is perfect as Noah Cross. He is perfect
And that's what's in my mind, because he also did a lot of voice work, I know, and a lot of narrators in the films. And I watch him in this film, and my God, I'm like, why didn't this man act more?
Yeah, well, he preferred writing and directing. He preferred being the boss. Not too hard, not too shabby to figure that out. It's kind of like Sidney Pollack. Sidney Pollack was an actor in the beginning of his career, and then he became a director and directed these incredible films such as Tootsie and The Way We Were and Out of Africa. And then near the end of his career, he kind of went back to acting a little bit. He's in Tootsie. He played Will Truman's father in Will and Grace. So but when you're the director, you're the boss, So naturally, you're going to want to do that. Same thing with Roman Polanski. Roman Polanski also acted. Roman Polanski was in The Fearless Vampire Killers, one of his first films that he made before he came to the United States to make Rosemary's Baby. He has a small part in Chinatown. So you realize when you're acting, directing, acting, which one you want to do? Well, most people want to do the one where they're calling the shots and they have the control. And that was certainly John Huston. But what a performance in Chinatown. Incredible. Chilling.
Yeah, just amazing. Before we go, let me give a quick rundown on this film.
Yes, how did this film perform?
This film was made under a $6 million budget, and it earned $29 million to date. I believe that's to date. It still did pretty well in its time, but it was, it was overshadowed in 1974 by the films I listed earlier: Blazing Saddles, Towering Inferno,
Godfather Part II.
It was actually pretty far down the list. I think it was 13. It was the 13th highest grossing film in 1974. Mm-hmm. It is, as I said, 21st in AFI's best 100 films of all time. I think it should be higher, as I think Network should be higher.
It is. It's unforgettable. 11 Oscar.
Even though I forgot it, it's unforgettable. 11
Oscar nominations, 1 win for Robert Towne. Incredibly well deserved. In my opinion, so it might not have been a financial blockbuster, but I'm sorry, you are hard pressed to name a film which is greater than Chinatown. Maybe, the Godfather saga, yes, but it's a saga. Okay. Chinatown, one film that did it all. And to this day, as I said, this screenplay is taught in classes and film classes. It's the Torah. People come to this screenplay to learn how to write a screenplay. And I don't think you can't give a film more praise than that. I mean, to me, on that Paramount Mountain, like I said at the very beginning, it is at the apex. It's the very apex for me of that mountain.
And as great as Godfather 1 and 2, we won't go into number 3, but as great as Godfather number 1 and 2 were, there were points where it dragged, and this movie never dragged.
Oh, God, no.
Ever.
You go on a ride in this movie. That's another thing I wanted to say, too, about, and the reason you're on a ride in this movie is because you are Jake.
Oh, yeah.
If you notice, there is not one scene without Jack Nicholson. And usually the camera is right behind him. So we are Jack Nicholson. We are finding out everything. That's what makes this movie so energizing and so galvanizing, is we're finding out this stuff the same time Jack Nicholson is. And that's what I love about this movie. Not a lot of movies do that. Usually they like to give things away. No, we find out exactly the same time that Jack Nicholson does. And that's what gives this movie its energy, its drive. Oh, can't say enough about this film.
And this, to me, is where it's a mystery novel on the screen, because to me, the best mystery novels are written in the first person.
Yeah.
Because as the reader, you want to get the clues and understand things as the PI or the sleuth, whoever the sleuth may be, is getting them. And that's what this film did. You are there. You are Jake.
All those classic Raymond Chandler films are told from the perspective of the Philip Marlowe or the main character, and so that's what's so incredible about this film. It is a film noir from 1974, which I think is timeless.
And I think this film was screwed when it comes to the Oscars, at least in the Golden Globes. It did get Best Picture, Best Actor.
Yeah. Oh, can we talk for a minute about the score? Oh, that score.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the second score. It was the second one. They threw out the first one because it didn't give the effect they wanted. They said it was too disjointed, too cacophonous. And so they called Jerry Goldsmith, and he put this score together in like 5 days. And this score, that trumpet, at the beginning of Chinatown, that the score makes everything. The very first screening of this with the old score did not go well, and they realized they needed a new score. And Jerry Goldsmith came in, and he scored this thing, and it is stunning. It's stunning. Everything in this movie is stunning. The acting, the set direction, the costumes by Anthea Sylbert, the score, the direction. Oh, you can't touch it. You can't touch it. Forget it. It's Chinatown. So anything else you want to say about Chinatown?
No, I think I've explained.
Yeah, I think we have to.
I think this film is okay.
Pretty damn okay. All right. Well, listen to our playlist. We have some wonderful songs from Chinatown. The score is gorgeous. Listen to it on our Spotify playlist. Please remember to rate and review us and subscribe. Anything else you want to say, Brad?
All I have to say, Tony, is let's not say goodbye. Let's just say au revoir.
No, let's say goodbye. Goodbye.
Do you enjoy going to Hollywood? Well, of course you do. And Tony and I would like you to do something for us and, more important, for other podcast listeners out there. Go to Apple Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts and rate and review the show. A 5-star would be especially nice. That way, when others are looking for a new show, they'll see ours and see those reviews, and they will stop and listen. And boy, that will make their day. It will be much appreciated. Thank you for being with us.